Pay close attention because this will rattle you. The most dangerous person in the room is not the narcissist yelling for attention. It is the quiet empath who has finally had enough. When kindness turns cold, when patience breaks down in clear vision, something terrifying is created, and almost no narcissist sees it coming. I want you to grasp something basic. An empath does not start as a threat. They start as a safe haven. They listen when others ignore. They forgive when others punish. They take in the mess and turn it into meaning. And that is exactly why the narcissist mistakes them for weakness. The narcissist sees tolerance and assumes they have won. They see care and assume control. That is their first and fatal mistake. Because what the narcissist never gets is this: empathy is not breaking easily. It is strength under self-control. The empath is not unable to cause damage. They are capable of holding back, and holding back is a choice, not a weakness. For a long time, the empath chooses peace. They choose patience. They choose to believe that if they give enough understanding, the other person will wake up. But every choice has a limit. There comes a moment, quiet, internal, irreversible, when the empath sees the pattern clearly, not with feelings, but with logic. They spot the manipulation without needing to explain it. They stop arguing. They stop begging. And when that happens, the dynamic falls apart because the narcissist survives on reaction, on emotional fuel, on drama, and the fed-up empath removes all three at once. This is not rage. This is determination. This is clarity sharpened by pain. The empath no longer needs to win, explain, or be seen as the good guy. They simply step back with precision. And that is what makes them risky to deal with. Not because they attack, but because they are finally willing to walk away without guilt. And once that line is crossed, there is no going back. The second thing you must get is this: the empath learns the narcissist before the narcissist ever studies the empath, quietly, patiently, through watching. While the narcissist is busy showing off, demanding, and playing games, the empath is paying attention to patterns, changes in tone, word choices, mixed messages, and emotional cycles. And this is key because data is power. The narcissist believes they are the mastermind in the room. They believe they are controlling the story. But the empath, through sensitivity, is gathering facts constantly, not to use them badly, but to understand. And understanding is far more dangerous than control. Because once you truly understand someone's mindset, their insecurities, their habits, their need for praise, you no longer fear them. For a long time, the empath uses this knowledge for defense. They adjust, they soften chats, they avoid sore spots, they carry the emotional load to keep the peace. And this creates a fake sense of being better in the narcissist. The narcissist thinks, I am winning. But what they are actually doing is training the empath, training them to see the games clearly, training them to spot the gaslighting instantly, training them to stop doubting their own eyes. And then something shifts. The empath stops taking the blame. They stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, why does this pattern never change? That question is deadly to the narcissist because narcissism depends on confusion, on emotional fog, on the other person endlessly fixing themselves. Clarity destroys that system. Once clarity sets in, the empath no longer reacts with feelings, and that is crushing. No anger, no tears, no big fight, just calm limits and emotional pullback. To the narcissist, this feels like being left alone, being exposed, and losing control all at once. The empath doesn't need revenge. Their power is silence backed by understanding. They know exactly who the narcissist is, and more importantly, they no longer need them to change. And that is when the balance of power quietly, permanently shifts. Here is the third truth, and it cuts deep. The empath's best weapon is not emotion. It is moral certainty built through pain. The narcissist operates in gray areas. They bend the truth. They reshape reality. They survive by making everything open to interpretation. But the fed-up empath reaches a point where things become painfully, unmovably clear. You see, for a long time, the empath doubts themselves. They replay talks. They second-guess their tone. They wonder if they are too sensitive, and that self-doubt is exactly what the narcissist feeds on. But suffering has a strange effect on a thinking person. It sharpens their moral compass. Pain forces deep thought. Deep thought produces values. And values create boundaries that no mind game can cross. At some point, the empath realizes this isn't a misunderstanding. This isn't a rough patch. this is a character issue. That realization is a disaster for the narcissist because once the empath frames the behavior as wrong rather than emotional, the game is over. You cannot mess with the head of someone who has firmly chosen their values. Now, the empath no longer argues details. They don't debate motives. They don't explain how they feel. They state rules calmly, firmly. And narcissists hate rules because rules don't bend for ego. Rules don't negotiate with charm. Rules don't break under threats. This is where the narcissist begins to panic. The empath is no longer trying to be understood. They are no longer looking for approval. They are acting in line with something deeper than likes, integrity. And integrity is terrifying to someone who lives through image management. The empath becomes unpredictable, not emotionally, but ethically. They will handle discomfort rather than betray their values. They will accept being alone rather than stay involved in disrespect. And that makes them impossible to control because the narcissist can dominate fear. They can use guilt. They can manipulate love, but they are powerless against someone who has decided with full clarity that self-respect matters more than connection. That decision marks the point of no return. The fourth reality is this. Once the empath disconnects emotionally, their strength grows massively. And this is where the narcissist makes their biggest mistake. They assume disconnecting means weakness. They assume silence means giving up. But emotional detachment, when it comes from clarity, is not a breakdown. It is a gathering of power. Before this stage, the empath is emotionally invested. They care deeply about results. They hope, they try, they deal, and that emotional investment keeps them open to hurt. The narcissist can trigger reactions, drain energy, and keep the empath locked in endless cycles of explaining and defending. But the fed-up empath crosses a mental line where caring turns into conscious distance. This does not look dramatic. There is no explosion, no final fight, no revenge speech. Instead, something far more unsettling happens. The empath stops responding the way they used to. They listen without taking it in. They watch without reacting. They step back without announcing it. And to the narcissist, this feels like standing in front of a mirror that suddenly reflects nothing back. The empath is no longer emotionally available to be played. Praise no longer gets them high. Criticism no longer hurts them. Guilt no longer hooks them. The narcissist ramps it up, love bombing, rage, playing the victim, but nothing lands. And when the games fail, panic sets in. Because narcissists do not fear anger, they fear being ignored. They fear losing emotional access. And the detached empath becomes emotionally unreachable, not out of cruelty, but out of self-protection. At this stage, the empath's decisions become frighteningly clean. They no longer ask, how will this make them feel? They ask, is this in line with my values? And that shift changes everything. Boundaries become firm, consequences become real, access becomes conditional. The narcissist senses the loss of control and often tries one last tactic, provocation. But provocation only works on someone who still cares enough to react. The fed-up empath doesn't, and that quiet, grounded, emotionally independent presence is something the narcissist cannot compete with, dominate, or destroy. Now, we arrive at the fifth stage, and this is where the danger truly grows. The fed-up empath begins to act with smart precision, though never recklessly. You see, for years, the narcissist assumes the empath will always respond from emotion, from kindness, from hope. That assumption is fatal because when empathy meets clarity, it transforms into a quiet, deliberate power. The empath studies patterns not for a fight, but for understanding. Every mind game, every lie, every emotional outburst becomes data. Every tactic used to control or put down is filed away in the empath's mind. And unlike the narcissist who acts on impulse, the empath calculates carefully. Every step is on purpose. Every boundary is reinforced with forward thinking. And this is what makes them invisible but deadly in effect. What the narcissist doesn't realize is that the empath no longer seeks to fix them. They no longer invest energy in proving the narcissist wrong or winning approval. That energy is now saved entirely for themselves. And this shift in focus is huge. The narcissist feels it immediately. They sense the crash of their emotional banking system, the drying up of the supply they once took for granted. The fed-up empath doesn't hit back for sport. They enforce consequences. They stop tolerating the mess. They remove access to attention, affection, and validation. And in doing so, they take apart the narcissist's power structure piece by piece, quietly but permanently. It's not anger that fuels them, it's awareness, not revenge, but boundaries. And boundaries, once set in stone, cannot be bent. At this point, the narcissist begins to panic, often lashing out desperately, seeking to regain the advantage they have lost. But the empath is no longer reactive. Every interaction is measured, intentional, and self-protective. Their danger lies in their unpredictability, no longer trapped in cycles of emotional reaction. The empath operates from clarity, insight, and unshakable self-respect. And that is the our ending point, where the fed-up empath becomes more powerful than the narcissist ever expected. The game is shifted and the narcissist's control is gone permanently. Here is the sixth section, and this one is key. The fed-up empath holds the most dangerous weapon of all, calm observation paired with deliberate action. The narcissist thrives on chaos, on drama, on emotional storms. They feed off the turbulence they create. But the empath, once fed up, learns to move through the storm like a still point at the center of a hurricane. Imagine a narcissist in full manipulation mode, shouting, accusing, messing with reality. They expect the empath to react, to defend, to crumble. But now the empath responds with nothing but clarity and calm. No defensiveness, no begging, no rage, just an unshakable awareness of the truth. And that awareness is damaging to the narcissist. They cannot dominate someone who no longer reacts the way they expect. This calm is not passive, it is intentional. The empath understands that overreacting would play into the narcissist's hands, that giving in would strengthen the old patterns. So they choose silence where words are traps, distance where being close invites games, and measured responses where emotional explosions would only fuel the narcissist. Every move is calculated, every word has a purpose. The narcissist becomes confused, they ramp it up, they try to provoke, they try guilt, charm, and threats. But the empath has predicted these tactics. They spot them instantly and do not bend. Every attempt to regain control is met with a wall of calmness. And that wall is unmovable because it is rooted in self-respect and understanding. This stage marks the moment the narcissist realizes they are no longer in charge, but it is too late. Their usual levers of control are useless. Emotional withdrawal, boundaries, and deliberate calm have turned the tables. The empath is no longer prey. They are the unshakable observer, the silent strategist, and the inevitable force the narcissist never saw coming. It is in this calm, precise, and detached power that the fed-up empath becomes more dangerous than the narcissist ever knew. Section 7 will deepen this even further. Now we reach the point where the empath's danger becomes almost real to the touch. The fed-up empath begins to reclaim space and energy, and in doing so, they take apart the narcissist's world quietly but completely. For years, the empath absorbs emotional chaos, sacrifices their own needs, and tolerates games. The narcissist thrives on this, believing that the empath's patience is endless, that their love has no conditions, that their forgiveness is infinite. But when the empath decides enough is enough, everything changes. They no longer allow themselves to be drained, no longer let their energy fuel the narcissist's ego. They take back their mental, emotional, and spiritual territory with precision. And this is terrifying to the narcissist. They cannot understand a person who puts self-respect over their demands. They cannot predict someone who no longer needs validation or approval from them. Empath's withdrawal is not a threat in the normal sense. It is a quiet, undeniable force. With each boundary enforced, with each moment of self-care observed, the narcissist's illusions crumble. At this stage, the empath no longer tolerates subtle mind games either. Gaslighting is exposed, lies are seen through, emotional blackmail is ignored. The empath sees everything for what it truly is, and they respond only on terms that keep their integrity safe. They are no longer reactive, they are methodical. The narcissist's attempts to control, force, or confuse fail because the empath has rebuilt their own inner framework around clarity, strength, and moral certainty. This stage is subtle, yet devastating. There is no public fight, no dramatic scenes, just a quiet revolution, a shift in the power dynamic so deep that the narcissist is left flailing, confused, and powerless. The empath is no longer a player in their games. They have risen above them. It is in this taking back of self, silent, deliberate, and unwavering, that the empath becomes a force the narcissist never expected and cannot contain. Here is section 8, and this is where the fed up empath's true influence comes out. They become inevitable. The narcissist may have controlled circumstances, manipulated how things looked, and dominated emotions for years. But the empath, once fully aware and firm, operates on a level the narcissist cannot touch. Think about it. The narcissist relies entirely on dependency. They need attention, reactions, admiration. They thrive on chaos because it feeds their sense of power. But the empath at this stage refuses to supply any of it. No reaction, no validation, no access. And when a narcissist cannot take what keeps them going, their influence falls apart. It doesn't matter how loud they scream or how cunning they plot, the empath is no longer taking part in the system that gives them life. At the same time, the empath's presence becomes quietly magnetic, not because they demand attention, but because they command respect. Their calm, firm boundaries, their ethical clarity, and their refusal to be played create a vibe that is impossible to ignore. People notice it. Other empaths, allies, even observers of toxic dynamics naturally sense it. And that visibility makes the narcissist powerless. They are exposed not by a fight, but by integrity in motion. This stage is transformative. The empath no longer waits for recognition, does not beg for fairness, and no longer just survives. They thrive. Every decision, every action, every silence is on purpose. They are fully in charge of their mind, body, and spirit. And that freedom terrifies narcissists because it cannot be weakened by charm, guilt, rage, or flattery. In effect, the fed-up empath becomes the one force the narcissist cannot predict, control, or manipulate. Their danger is in their certainty. The certainty that truth, clarity, and self-respect will outlast games, lies, and dominance. Here is section 9, and this is where the fed-up empath reaches their ultimate strategic power. They move from defense to quiet authority. Up to this point, the empath has survived, watched, and taken back their energy. But now they don't just exist outside the narcissist's control. They shape the environment around them in ways the narcissist cannot expect or resist. The narcissist relies on leverage, on emotional hooks, guilt, fear, or charm. But the fed-up empath has neutralized all these levers. And here's the key. The empath doesn't need to attack or seek revenge. They simply operate from unwavering clarity, letting the narcissist's own tactics fail under a close look. Every lie, every game, every attempt at dominance is met with precise observation and immovable boundaries. The narcissist's power evaporates not because of a fight, but because the empath refuses to take part in their drama. This stage is silent but devastating. Allies, colleagues, friends, even casual observers notice the shift. The narcissist's influence shrinks as the empath's calm authority grows. People no longer tolerate the chaos the narcissist thrives on because the empath has modeled a different strength, rooted in integrity, calm, and clarity. The narcissist begins to lose control over their environment, their reputation, and their own story. And the most dangerous aspect is the empath does not have to enforce consequences aggressively. Boundaries themselves, consistently kept, become consequences. No access, no emotional supply, no reaction. These simple measures applied with consistency and clarity are far more destructive than any outburst or payback could ever be. By the time the narcissist realizes what has happened, it is too late. The empath is no longer a victim, no longer a participant in the games. They are the quiet, strategic force that sets the rules, timing, and consequences. And that is why a fed-up empath is more dangerous than the narcissist ever knew. This is the final part. The fed-up empath is no longer defined by suffering, tolerance, or hope for change. They are defined by clarity, strength, and unshakable self-respect. Every game the narcissist ever tried, every lie, every attempt at control has been made powerless. Not by fury, not by revenge, but by the empath's unwavering commitment to their own boundaries and principles. The danger of a fed-up empath is subtle yet absolute. They do not need to attack because they operate from certainty. They do not seek to harm because their power is built on holding back. They do not beg or negotiate because their freedom is complete. And this is what makes them terrifying to a narcissist. The empath cannot be controlled, cannot be messed with, and cannot be made irrelevant by emotional pressure. In the end, the fed-up empath rewrites the rules of the relationship entirely. The end. Narcissists' games fall apart in silence. The emotional supply dries up, influence vanishes, and the empath stands calm yet unyielding, a force shaped by wisdom, resilience, and moral certainty. They are not just surviving, they are thriving, untouchable by games and unstoppable in their integrity. Remember this: the true power of the empath is not in fury, but in awareness, clarity, and the courage to take back themselves. When patience runs out and empathy turns firm, the narcissist realizes too late that they have underestimated the one person they assumed would always bend. And in that mistake, the empath becomes more dangerous than they ever imagined. The lesson is clear. Never mistake empathy for weakness. Never assume patience is submission, because the fed-up empath is not just strong, they are inevitable.